History doesn't politely stay in the past. It lingers. It leaks. It shows up in names, habits, arguments, and quiet decisions we don't even realize we're making. Some moments explode. Others just echo. There may be a few topics of these stories that are sensitive for some listeners. But keep in mind, we're here to honor and remember, but not relive. If this is your first time here, this is the show where we slow history down just enough to hear it breathe. Where the past isn't treated like a highlight reel, but like a long conversation. Messy, unfinished, and still talking back to us. Sometimes louder than we'd like. Kind of like our teenagers. Today's episode is the end of the week roundup for January 27th through January 30th. And before we get into battles, votes, records, and headlines, we start where we always do now, with the people who didn't make the textbooks, but still shaped the outcome. The Family Thread, Part 4, The Echo. William the Patriot Knuckles never fired a shot in the Revolutionary War, and yet his choices didn't end when the war did. That's the part we don't talk enough about. The Echo. William's patriotism didn't come in a discharged state. He lived the rest of his life inside the consequences of what he supported, religiously, politically, and socially. To openly align with the Baptist movement in post-revolution Virginia mattered. This was still a state figuring out what religious freedom actually meant in practice. Being Baptist wasn't trendy. It wasn't safe. It wasn't neutral. It was a statement. The Knuckles Meeting House wasn't just a place of worship. It was a declaration that authority no longer flowed from England, or from the Church of England, or from tradition alone. Faith, like governance, had fractured, and William chose a side. Then there's the name. Changing the family spelling from Knuckles with 2 L's to Knuckles with 1 wasn't cosmetic. It was intentional separation, a quiet but permanent signal to future generations. This is who we were, and this is who we chose to be. No speeches, no statues, just ink on paper that lasted longer than most monuments. This is how history actually survives. Not in fireworks, but in follow-through. Not in victories, but in inheritance. And whether you realize it or not, you're living inside echoes too. Thank you for listening to one of the stories about my family. This is where I want to hear from you. Not just about famous ancestors. Not just about war heroes. Tell me about the quiet ones. The people in your family who made a choice that changed the direction of everyone who came after. Even if no one outside the family noticed. Send those stories in. Because history isn't just what happened. It's what kept happening. Send them to dravinsden@gmail.com. Now let's roll into January 7th history. 1945. Soviet troops liberated Auschwitz. There's no humor here. And there shouldn't be. Soviet troops of the 60th Army of the 1st Ukrainian Front liberated Auschwitz-Birkenau, the largest concentration and extermination camp in occupied Poland. What they found was not a battlefield, but evidence. Thousands of survivors in critical condition, mass graves, abandoned barracks, and physical proof of industrialized murder. Liberation did not undo the crime. It documented it. It exposed a system built to erase people so completely that even their absence was meant to go unquestioned. January 27th did not make the world better. It made denial harder. That distinction matters. Awareness is not justice. Knowledge is not repair. But without that moment, without witnesses, history could have been buried, rewritten, or dismissed as an exaggeration. And now January 27th is known as International Holocaust Remembrance Day, designated by the United Nations in 2005. The date was chosen to mark that liberation. The day is dedicated to remembering the 6 million Jewish victims of the Holocaust, along with millions of others targeted by Nazi persecution. It also serves as a warning, an acknowledgement of how quickly dehumanization can become policy when it goes unchallenged. International Holocaust Remembrance Day is not about closure. It exists because memory requires maintenance. Facts must be protected. Testimony must be preserved. Some events do not fade with time. They demand witnesses, generation after generation. Remembering January 27th is not about symbolism. It's about responsibility. History's responsibility isn't comfort, it's memory. Now, January 27, 1967, Apollo 1. During a ground test at Cape Kennedy, a flash fire swept through the Apollo 1 command module, killing astronauts Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger Chaffee. The capsule was sealed, pressurized with pure oxygen, and filled with flammable materials. The crew had no chance to escape. The tragedy halted the Apollo program. Launches were canceled. Hardware was dismantled. Congressional hearings followed. Investigators identified systemic problems, design flaws, rushed schedules, and a culture that underestimated risk. NASA did not abandon the moon mission. It rebuilt it. The spacecraft was redesigned. Materials were replaced. And safety protocols were fundamentally changed. Those lessons carried forward into a very successful Apollo flight that followed. Failure did not end the mission. Ignoring it would have. And those brave souls paved the way. It was January 27, 1986. It was a frigid day of only 5 degrees Fahrenheit when the Bears had a ticker tape parade in the Loop celebrating their 46-10 Super Bowl XX victory over the New England Patriots at the Louisiana Superdome. The game was never close. Chicago's defense, already legendary, overpowered New England from the opening kickoff, recording 7 sacks and forcing multiple turnovers. Led by linebacker Mike Singletary and defensive coordinator Buddy Ryan, the Bears' 46 defense overwhelmed defenses all season. Quarterback Jim McMahon managed the game efficiently, while running back Walter Payton anchored an offense built to complement a defense that simply refused to bend. The Bears finished the '85 season 15-1, a cold-weather team with a physical, relentless identity. They didn't rely on finesse. They relied on pressure, discipline, and wearing opponents down. Defense heavy, ruthless, unapologetic. Basically the football equivalent of January itself. And on January 27, 1951, CBS aired the first episode of See It Now, a news program hosted by Edward R. Murrow. At the time, television news was still treated as filler between entertainment. See It Now changed that. Murrow used the format to show, not just tell, what was happening in the world, setting the foundation for modern broadcast journalism. The program would later become famous for its 1954 report on Senator Joseph McCarthy, proving that television could hold power accountable rather than simply amplify it. That shift mattered. News stopped being something you read after the fact and became something you watched unfold. Culturally, January 27th reminds us that how information is delivered shapes what societies believe. Technology doesn't just transmit truth, it frames it. That lesson has aged uncomfortably well. January 28, 1915. The United States Coast Guard was officially established when Congress merged the U.S. Life-Saving Service with the Revenue Cutter Service. The decision created a single organization responsible for maritime safety, law enforcement, and rescue along America's coastlines and waterways. Unlike other branches of the military, the Coast Guard's primary mission was, and remains, protecting lives. Its early crews patrolled dangerous shores in brutal weather, launching small boats into storms to reach shipwrecks before survivors were lost to the sea. There were no parades for that work, just routine risk. Over the next century, the Coast Guard would expand its responsibilities to include environmental protection, port security, drug interdiction, and disaster response. Through it all, the core mission stayed the same. Arrive when others can't. Not flashy, not loud, just quietly saving lives. Another significant tragedy that happened during my lifetime that I actually remember seeing was January 28, 1986. 73 seconds after liftoff, Space Shuttle Challenger broke apart over the Atlantic Ocean, killing all 7 crew members aboard. Millions were watching live as the shuttle disintegrated against the Florida sky. The cause was traced to a failure of O-ring seals in the right solid rocket booster, which lost elasticity in unusually cold temperatures. Engineers had warned the conditions were unsafe for launch. Those warnings were overridden. The disaster forced NASA to confront not just a mechanical failure, but a cultural one. Investigations revealed communication breakdowns, schedule pressure, and a willingness to accept increasing risk as normal. The shuttle program was grounded for nearly 3 years. Challenger changed how spaceflight was managed, discussed, and understood. Exploration didn't stop, but it lost its illusion of invulnerability. Some failures don't just end missions. They rewrite the rules. You're looking for a date that's jam-packed with unbelievable sports highlights. January 28 tops that list. It was hard to pick just one, but being that I'm a hockey fan, in 1984, Wayne Gretzky's NHL record 51-game point streak ended when the Los Angeles Kings defeated the Edmonton Oilers 4-2. During this historic run, which started on October 5, 1983, the Great One recorded 61 goals and 92 assists for a total of 153 points. The 153 points accumulated during the 51-game streak alone would have been enough to win the league's scoring title that season. The streak was halted by the LA Kings, who notably used goalie Marcus Mattson to stop all 4 of Gretzky's shots in that final game. During the streak, Gretzky averaged an incredible 3 points per game. Including the end of the previous season, he had technically recorded a point in 60 consecutive regular season games. Despite the streak ending, Gretzky finished the 1983-84 season with 205 points, winning his 5th straight Hart Memorial Trophy and his first Stanley Cup. Fun fact, the Oilers were so confident the streak would continue, they actually invited baseball legend Joe DiMaggio to attend their 56th, 57th games, thinking he would be present to witness history. And January 28, 1958, Lego patented its modern brick design. In 1958, at 1:58 p.m., the Lego Group officially patented the modern interlocking design of their toy building brick. This crucial invention, which introduced tubes inside for better stability, which they call clutch power, transformed the company from wooden toys to a global creative system, marking this date as International Lego Day. January 29th is a somber and significant date in Native American military history, primarily marked by the Bear River Massacre of 1863. Colonel Patrick Edward Connor led nearly 300 U.S. California volunteers in an attack on the northern Shoshone winter encampment in present-day Franklin County, Idaho. The death toll? It is considered one of the largest mass murders of Native Americans by the U.S. military. An estimated 250 to 493 Shoshone, men, women, and children, were killed, while the U.S. Army suffered 21 fatalities. On January 29, 1861, Kansas was admitted to the Union as a 34th state, acting as a free state under the Wyandot Constitution. This milestone followed roughly 7 years of violent conflict, known as Bleeding Kansas, characterized by fraudulent elections, murder, and intense struggles between pro-slavery and free state forces after the 1854 Kansas-Nebraska Act. Statehood didn't erase the damage, but it drew a line. And January 29, 1936, the Baseball Hall of Fame elected its first class. The Baseball Writers Association of America announced the inaugural Baseball Hall of Fame class, electing 5 immortals: Ty Cobb, Babe Ruth, Honus Wagner, Christy Mathewson, and Walter Johnson, who received at least 75% of the 226 votes cast. Cobb topped the voting with 98.2%. Followed by Babe Ruth and Wagner. Turns out Americans do like history, as long as it comes with stats. In 1854, Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven was first published under his name in the New York Evening Mirror, instantly turning the struggling author into a household name, though he was only paid $9 for the poem. It became a massive sensation, launching the phrase "nevermore" into pop culture. The poem was so popular that children would follow Poe in the street, flapping their arms and calling "nevermore." The poem was inspired by his fear of losing his young wife, Virginia, to tuberculosis, and was partly written while they lived in a small farmhouse in what is now known as Manhattan. While it made him famous, the $9 payment is equivalent to only about $300 today. 1862, launch of the USS Monitor. The Union's first ironclad warship was launched in Greenpoint, New York, just in time to encounter the Confederate ironclad Virginia. And January 30th, 1933, Adolf Hitler became Chancellor of Germany. A reminder that history doesn't always announce its worst moments with sirens. Sometimes it arrives legally. And 1964, the New York Rangers retired Terry Sawchuk's number because legends don't disappear, they get remembered. 1969, the Beatles rooftop concert. No permits, no encore, just a band saying goodbye without saying it loud. History doesn't stop when the moment passes. It echoes through families, through laws, through songs, stadiums, silent decisions, and sometimes tragedy. January has taught us anything so far. It's that the past is never as done with us as we think. Tune in next time to Dravin's Den. I'm your host, Stan Miles, and I appreciate your time.